Brian, do me a favor. Give me some good advice on how you would launch Microsoft Copilot.
Well, as in all things these days, I asked Copilot how to prepare for Microsoft Copilot, and it said, ensure every user has just the right access permissions for each individual user.
That is some good advice. Cyrus, I'm going to go to you and ask, give me some bad advice on launching Microsoft Copilot.
You don't need to red team it. You can trust tech companies to go all the right precautions to make sure you're safe.
Oh, that's some pretty good bad advice. All right, back to you, Brian. Give me some worse advice.
Worse advice, just give it to everybody without thinking about anything. Just turn it on and assume, listen, Copilot's it's gonna make everybody more productive. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Of course. Let's start.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
Welcome, everybody, to Super Cyber Friday. It's been a couple of weeks. Today's topic of conversation is hacking Microsoft Copilot. Yes, an hour of critical thinking of how to get your Copilot into production, or out of pilot mode, if you will. And our guest, who you just saw there just a second ago, that's Cyrus Tibbs, who's the CISO over at PennyMac, brand new CISO as well. And also Brian Vecchi, who we've had on before, field CTO over at Varonis. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Varonis, for sponsoring this very episode of the CISO series. We've been looking forward to this. We've been talking about Copilot for quite some time. We're going to get into it in just a moment. Lots of different ways to participate. You saw the chat room, everybody. You can see how that works. Also, we want your bad ideas. How not to deploy Microsoft Copilot. So if we want to know how not to do that, just label it bad idea : But we also want your 10% better tips. So what is a small tip you could provide to make a launch of Copilot that much better and safer and more secure and not busting everybody's privacy wide open? You can also possibly join us on video at any time. Just say, bring me on, and our producers, either Rich or Andrew, will try to get you on. You can ask a question anytime or vote for your favorite question. The questions, if you look at the icons in the upper right, it's the second icon down, the little speech bubble with the question mark. Just put your questions in there. I prioritize those first before my own darn questions. All right. Here's our schedule. You've seen it before. We have our good advice, bad advice, worse advice. You just got that. Right now, we're playing bad idea and 10%, so start putting them in. We're going to play the public interest. We'll play the department of yes. The last question is advice, and we'll have our meetup at the end. And I'm just going to say it's a bittersweet end to our meetup in this platform. We're going to still keep doing meetups, but the platform that we use, Toucan, today is literally the very last day it can be used. So I want as many of you to get on that and enjoy and come. And why somebody else hasn't picked this up or taken it or bought it, I have no idea, because you will see how awesome it is. And this is the last day of it. Last thing I do want to mention right here is that next week our show is Hacking SOC 2 versus ISO 27001, an hour of critical thinking about the value of those compliance standards. There's going to be a link at the bottom of the screen. You see that right there? Click on it at any time during the show to register for that event. It will not take you out of this event. You will still be in this event. It will just open another window. You can register for that while still being in the event. Please do that. I'm going to harp on it all throughout the show. All right, enough of that. I am now going to toss this to Brian, because Brian has a really good video, and he's going to sort of give an explanation as he plays it that really shows what this problem is. All right, so Brian, can you show this to us?
Absolutely. So for those of you that have never used Microsoft Copilot for 365. Microsoft means like 9 different things when you say Copilot, but Copilot for 365 absolutely can be potentially the greatest productivity tool ever. Imagine a digital assistant. We could all use one that's 24/7 and it's got access to all your data, your emails. It knows who you've been working with. It knows what content you got access to. It can summarize meetings, identify action items, find data for you, help you create new data. I know everybody in my life could use an assistant, especially a really smart one that never slept. So Copilot can absolutely have it has the potential to make everybody dramatically more productive. But what can go wrong? So imagine you just ask Copilot, show me for data on new employees. One of our customers was a CISO of a bank, and they gave it to their traders, and these traders were finding employee 401k data because all they were doing was asking, wait, what stocks do our employees invest in? Copilot has got access to all the data that you have access to. It's built on what's called the Microsoft Graph. There's an index of content built on top of that. So you prompt it, and it goes and finds, or it references anything that you happen to have access to. So you can ask it for data about employees. If I'm a threat actor, this is my best friend. I can go find credentials. I can go find logins and passwords, whether I know that they're there or not. For so long, we've lived in a world where it's security through obscurity, right? Especially in a collaborative platform like 365. Who knows where any data is? It could be anywhere. It could be in a team site or a OneDrive share, a SharePoint site, in somebody's inbox. Copilot doesn't care. Copilot's just going to go give it to you because you've got access to it, so clearly you're supposed to have access to it. So Copilot's going to go find it. I can find API keys and connection strings. Copilot will even write the code for me. And because LLMs are really good at least pretending to have context, it's not just the highly sensitive stuff like the payment card information and the API keys and the social security numbers. It's also things like content related to M&A. And Copilot can really make it easy for me to mine that data, find something really valuable, and then use it or even create lots of new content. This is something, I think the whole point of today is we're going to talk about hacking Copilot or how to get your Copilot pilot out of pilot. Everybody's kicking the tires, dipping their toes in the water, trying this out. But once you start trying to use it to find stuff that you think probably shouldn't be there, that you shouldn't have access to, suddenly this problem of access control becomes a problem you have to solve right now. You can't kick that can down the road.
And that's why I know you've had a ton of conversation on this. I'm going to go over to you, Cyrus, on this. And I just want to clear everybody. Cyrus doesn't currently use Microsoft Copilot. They're a Google shop right now. But this issue of using the productivity tools, Gemini, I would assume it's the equivalent of Copilot for Microsoft, or not for Google. What is the conversations you're having in terms of what people are already using, what controls you do already have in place, and where is your interest? Because I got to assume there's a desire, but there's a fear also at the same time where everyone's sitting.
Yeah, we're a national mortgage company, so customer data is like the lifeblood of the entire business. So I think
and
a
you
lot
have
of
crazy sensitive data too.
Yeah, pretty much the worst kind. And a lot of the employees are really sensitized to it, but I think some people have relied on sort of the security through obscurities. When they share things, they don't know what they've shared with other people, or they don't realize that they've made something available to everybody. And I feel like these kinds of tools are going to really shine a light on those kind of bad practices. So how do you, as a security team, how do you discover and unwind all those permissions that users aren't even aware of? So you're going to be sort of caught on your back foot that, you're going to want to roll this out slowly. You're going to choose different groups. Maybe you want to exclude certain groups, people that handle like earnings reports and things that are really privacy related. You're going to want to try and figure that out way before you even turn any of this stuff on. So we're really in the early test phases on our end here to make sure that we don't run into exactly what Brian just demonstrated in the video there. That's kind of everybody's worst nightmare is you turn that on too fast, right?
Right, and it comes down to that. I think that's the line, the turning on too fast, and I see some bad ideas that kind of speak to that. Is there, because going back to you, Brian, there is this desire with all technology of rolling it out slowly. Is there a slow drip mode for Copilot, or what I don't know, how can it be handled? Or limiting questions, or I know it's limiting access, but what's the right sort of rollout phase, I guess?
Well, there's no one sentence answer to that, but of course there's a crawl, walk, run approach. Part of the problem is we tend to attack these things from, okay, this is an AI readiness, a user training. Like if we just train our users to behave appropriately, they're going to be fine, or at least that's going to let us deploy this. But the example, I went through it really fast, but the example of the bank that gave it to their traders who were finding employee 401k data, it's not that these traders weren't trained on how to use AI. It's not that they were suddenly insider threats that they didn't know about. But the whole point of giving them Copilot is that it was going to make them more productive by making their research faster and more effective, by letting them ask questions. And then Copilot was going to have access to all this content, all this analysis that would make their jobs easier. And they were asking a very simple question. What stocks do our employees invest in? Thinking, we hire smart people. This is going to give us an edge. And Copilot doesn't know that these people are not supposed to have access to employee 401k positions. So there is an approach, like you can take a crawl, walk, run approach. You can pilot it. You can make sure that the people that are using it only have access to what they're supposed to. But if you go too quickly, regardless of user training, regardless of what your policies are, bad things are going to happen.
Is there a way, and maybe I'm leaping a little too far ahead with this question, but let's take that one, like what the 401k, what are our employees investing in? Let's say I don't have access, but I have limited access. Can limits be put on where I'm allowed to ask this question, but given that I don't have full access, like, hey, I can't see every employee, it'll say, oh, because you have this access, your answers cannot be detailed at the employee level, but we could categorize like everyone in marketing is investing in this, and everyone in this is like. Can that level of control be done, or is it not handled in that way?
Well, the right way to think about it is these users, I'm going to keep picking on these traders, shouldn't have access to employee 401k data, period. They just shouldn't. But part of the problem is if you don't know where that stuff is, in this case, it happened to be in a series of spreadsheets that was in a team site. These users were part of a distribution list that had been added to that team site for a completely legitimate reason. They had no idea that it was there. They had no idea that this data was available to them. Copilot doesn't care. So you're really getting to the point of you need to make sure that every user only has access to what they are supposed to. And part of the problem with a platform like 365 or Google Workspace is that you can't take a role-based approach to this. You can't just say, these users should have access to this kind of data. That sounds great in theory, but I can click share on any document, share it with anybody in the company. I can collaborate with anybody inside or outside of my team, inside or outside the company. Role-based access does not work for collaborative data. It's cross-functional by nature. So you really we're kind of getting to the crux of the problem. Data can be anywhere. It can be accessible by anybody. And Copilot is going to leverage all of, and it's not just Microsoft Copilot. We don't need to just pick on them. I know we kind of are today, but the same thing is true for Einstein Copilot and Salesforce. The same thing is true of Gemini. These tools are going to leverage the access graph that every account has, and that is by design because the controls are there to lock things down. You know the way a shared link works in 365 is it's actually a SharePoint group that has the users and other entities that have access to the link are part of that group. So in theory, you could make sure that these traders don't have access to employee 401k data. And in theory, you could, I'm going to quote Copilot here because I'm not kidding. I've got the screenshot where I asked Copilot how to prepare for Copilot. It says, ensure you have just enough access permissions in place for each user. That is possible in theory. The problem is we tend to have, and Cyrus, I'm really curious about your thoughts here. I've met a lot of CISOs who have more projects than they have people. Like there is no army of people that you can hire to go do that because every single file has its own set of access controls. Like, so who is going to do this? That's the big problem we have.
You know, I think this is one of the situations where we need AI to help secure AI. And in the sense that right now, when you do data for classification, right, you're looking for like, you know, find the social, find the credit card number, find the sensitive data, right? I think we really need the AI, you know, true to form, security always comes after the feature, right? So we need the AI to be able to be, instead of saying like, hey, this is where sensitive data is, to say like, you know, these are tax forms, these are earnings reports, these are, you know, use the large language model to tell us what kind of actual data that is so that we can build, instead of saying, okay, you're in this group and in this role and you have access to these things, you can say, well, these people in these groups should only see these kinds of files. So then you can put a guardrail on the AI so that when it actually tries to, you know, read that data, it knows just based on the actual, you know, what a human would call that thing, not what you know, basically right now we just say, is it sensitive or is it not sensitive? And then you try and, you know, limit access to that. But I think that's what's going to come out here is that as more people adopt these things, you're going to see all these kind of internal inadvertent insider threat incidents. And then we're going to start demanding that, hey, we need to be able to create more of an attribute-based view or a type of file view. And then that's the view security teams are going to need, you know, to your point, Brian, like we're not going to be able to scale with the current classification technology against the current AI large language model review, right? It's got to go at a higher level for us.
One of the things that I think is really important to realize, though, and I agree with you completely, is that there is a difference. What you're really talking about is a data label when it gets down to it. It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Is it labeled appropriately? And you're just sensitive, not sensitive is too blunt force an instrument. But if you can say, all right, because of the contents, it should be labeled this way. And then when you have a data label that's accurate, and I'll talk about this in a bit, but let's assume that the label is accurate, then you can apply a control like AI or these kinds of users should never be able to reference this kind of data. One of the things that's really hard to separate out, though, is that the actual content of a data container, a file, an S3 bucket, an Azure Blob container, whatever it might be, the content is different from the label, is different from the access control. Those are three different sets of information and controls, and you have to get each one of them differently. Like to understand the content, you have to index the content. To scan the label, you just have to scan it, but to apply it, you need to understand the content. And then the access controls could depend on either or both. Those are three different things. And we often in security focus on only one. If I know where all my sensitive data is, I can protect it. No, you can't, because if it's not labeled and you're not managing the access controls and you're not monitoring it, because use is another kind of a fourth pillar there, then you don't have the context you need to effectively make a decision, even if that decision is automatic.
But hold it. Let me pause you on that, because there's a combination of old world and new world thinking there, in that prior to AI, and I was literally just talking to somebody about this, but prior to AI, the way we looked at data management or data security management was label your data, and it was kind of a manual task in that respect, or minimally intelligent, I would say. But we are at a point, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm assuming this is what Varonis does, and I do want to get into our first game here, is we're at a point where you can just look at that data. Copilot can look at the data and know that it's sensitive. Like, they have the knowledge, like, this is social security numbers, this is salary numbers. I know from everything else that this is sensitive information. Agree or disagree with that?
You can for certain kinds of data. You can pretty accurately determine, this is credit card information. Can you determine that this is a document outlining a long-term strategy for M&A for the company? Maybe.
To a degree, you could. And I'll tell you, I'm going to make
here's
a
the problem
argument here.
Yeah, here's the problem. To a certain degree, you can. One of the things that we found is just relying on an automated analysis like that. Let's say you can get it to 90% accurate. 10% isn't going to be. And just understanding the content does not mean that the label is right, which means that the perimeter controls may or may not apply, and that none of that has anything to do with access control. And part of the problem is, if you try to determine access control based on content, because data is cross-functional, I might share something that is highly sensitive with people in 4 or 5 different departments inside Varonis, just because of the nature of my job. So does it mean that all of marketing, all of R&D, all of HR, and all of legal should have access to that document? Probably not. Does it mean that the 5 people that I shared it with should? Probably. So it's gray areas in there, which is why you have to separate content from labeling, from access controls, from usage. Because if you're not looking at usage, part of the problem we face here is that these are collaborative platforms where I can create a link and share it with you, and then that link never goes away. Or I can create a link that anybody can use, and that link never goes away. So unless you're actually looking at how people are leveraging the access that they have, it is a moving target. It's like mowing your lawn. You can wave a magic wand, lock everything down, make sure everything's labeled, and everything is going to change tomorrow. Because if people are going to create new data, there's going to be new business processes. People are just going to have to collaborate and share. So we're trying to manage all 3 of these things: the content, the label, the access controls, and they require different kinds of context. And that context changes over time. Context is really key here.
All right, we got to go to our first game. Hold on.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right, while we're playing the public interest, everyone please play along if you can. And we also have tons of questions coming in. We're going to get loaded with questions here, but please ask your questions. I do want to remind people to register for next week's event. That's the June 7th event, Hacking SOC 2 versus ISO 27001. That affects everybody, I think, these days. All right, the public interest. This is pretty simple. Cyrus, I know you've never played, but here how it works. Whoops. Most average monthly search queries, what do you think? Is it data poisoning, deepfake, hallucination, prompt injection? What do you think more people search? And that, Brian or Cyrus, what do you think?
I think it's deepfake. That seems a little bit more a broader of a search that would apply to.
Although
more
hallucination doesn't have to be cybersecurity too. It could be anything.
people. No, nor does deepfake necessarily. I think it's either B or C, but I'm gonna go with B.
All right, deepfake. What do you think, Cyrus?
I'm in the same boat, but I was favoring C, so I'll go C.
All right.
Hallucination.
I
think,
by the way,
think
I
more
didn't
people
create
are worried
this.
about that. Yeah.
Rich created this. I'm going to guess C as well. Let's see how you guys do. Correct answer is B. All right. Brian
Yeah,
takes the
long shot.
first point. All right. As I always point out, extremely.
I'm very competitive in this game. This is.
There's 4 questions. Brian's 1 for 1. We're 0 for 1. Cyrus here. It's very difficult to go 4 for 4. We've only had it, I think, maybe 2 times. 2 guests have done this. So we'll see how you do, Brian. All right. Second one. Most average monthly search queries is it boundary, residency, or compliance?
I'll let
Again.
Cyrus pick first this time.
By the way, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be people in cyber answering this.
Yeah. I was gonna go compliance too. Just in general, that's what people are gonna be searching for.
I'm sorry. Did you say compliance too, Cyrus?
I said yeah.
I said
G,
compliance. Compliance.
Okay, both are going compliance. I'm gonna say E boundary. That's what I'm gonna say. See what we got. No, compliance takes it 2 for 2 on Brian. 1 for 2 for Cyrus. Here we go. All right, next one. Proof of concept, pilot project, dry run. Oh, these are good ones. This is
Go ahead, Brian. Your turn to go first.
I think it's proof of concept.
Yeah, me too.
That seems
I'm
like the
gonna
more
go H,
common
proof of concept.
search.
I'm going dry run, actually. I think dry run might do it. Oh, no, although if no one would do that in a search. You know what? You guys are right. I'm going proof of concept too. H. Yeah, we're all going H here. Let's see what happens. Yes! Proof of concept. Oh, my God. Brian, your last one. Let's do this. Pull it out.
pressure
You're
here.
3
There,
for 3. Almost there.
Can I ask
All right.
Copilot? Okay.
Copilot, GPT, Transformer, Gemini. Wow, this is a tough one.
I'm
gonna
gonna
go-
let Cyrus
Copilot
go
could
first
be
this
anything.
time.
I'm gonna go GPT. GPT.
I am also gonna go GPT. I think that's what people are probably searching more for.
Yeah, right now.
This may
probably.
change over the next year, but I think
First
Yeah,
mover
but I'm
advantage.
going to say
First
L.
mover
It's
advantage.
L. No!
No!
Oh, my God. Gemini. Oh,
I think
almost
Google
had it.
is goosing
Yeah.
those results.
Yeah,
There is
yeah.
no way. There is now.
Those are
maybe-
Google bots.
Those are Google bots searching for Gemini. That is. I'm playing this game under protest.
Did
Yeah,
did
I
anyone
failed.
get
Now maybe
Gemini
if it
on
was
that last one?
ChatGPT, maybe there's a difference in the term between GPT and ChatGPT. So
Oh, Gemini. Yeah, like Sean said, Gemini's a sign. Yep. False positive.
oh, yeah,
maybe
that-
that
positive
was
curve.
it. So
False
yeah,
positive
that's-
curve. We got-
I thought
we got
about
the
that with dry
horoscopes
run,
out
and I
there.
didn't even. I should have thought about that, Gemini. Yeah, good.
All right.
point.
All right. I want to use this to, before we get into all our questions, I want you to sort of clearly explain how Varonis is tackling this. You were telling me, you know, almost every single one of your interviews is about Copilot, so this is not the first time you've talked about this. So just give me the quick synopsis. How is Varonis attacking this very issue that seems to be of great concern?
Yeah, well, so one of the things Cyrus said up front is that this is kind of a modern. I'm paraphrasing. It's a modern problem. You kind of need to fight fire with fire. The old ways of trying to secure data just don't work. So what we do is we go out and we figure out what data is sensitive. We also look at all of the configuration, the posture, and the access controls. So we look at every link, every group, every SharePoint group, every Enter ID group, all the relationships between them. We build our own map, and we monitor the behavior. And we're scanning the full contents of every file, but we're also looking at how it's all used, so everything is in near real time. And we know exactly how anybody or anything can access anything. Then when you've got all that, you can build automation on top of it. So you can say, all right, if people have access to sensitive data, but they've never used it before, or people have access to data that is open to everybody, just take that access away, but leave the access that people are using. And then we integrate with Purview. So we tell Purview, hey, this file is sensitive, but it doesn't have the right label on it. One of our customers is a casino. I've told this story a lot. They were trying to do everything that they could to protect their data. And one of the things that they did is they said, all right, if you're accessing something sensitive, you can't use a personal device. Because of course you can't, because that would be absurd. Why are you using your kid's laptop to access spreadsheets that have the cell phone numbers of billionaires? But their users discovered that if they just marked the file as public, then they could work from home and they wouldn't have to come into the office, and commuting on the Las Vegas Strip can be a pain. So we did a readiness assessment for them, and we found tons of highly sensitive stuff that had been marked public, not because they were under attack, not because their users were being malicious. They just wanted to work from home. So what we do is we tell Purview, yeah, this should be marked as sensitive. These links need to go away. This highly sensitive stuff doesn't need to be open to everybody. And then we watch how people are actually prompting Copilot, what the responses are, and what the sensitive files are that are being referenced as part of those responses. And then we've got an eye in the sky that'll tell you when something weird is going on. So you end up with preventive controls that are much more effective and detective controls that are much more effective. But it doesn't require a lot of work to do it, because we discover, I've been doing this for 15 years. If it's not automatic or we're not doing it for you, it's really unlikely you're going to do it, because we all have so much other stuff to do from a security perspective.
So, I mean, it actually has to be done on the planet. All right. With that being said, so if you would like a nice warm handoff to the fine people over at Varonis, we can provide that for you. So go to our poll section. It's the little bar chart icon on the right there, third one down. Click on it. There's a poll there. You can select actually either option. You'll see how it works. And we will make a warm handoff to the fine people over at Varonis if you want to learn more about that. So that's up for the whole show, so please click on that. And by the way, if you haven't clicked on the button at the bottom of the screen to register for next week's event, do that too. All right. We're going to start going through the questions. And actually, Cyrus, I don't know what you know about these, about how these LLMs are actually operating or stuff, but I'm going to ask this first question from an Ian Pointer. Either one of you jump in on this. This, I think, is just really a question is, do we know how the LLMs operate? And he asks, how much can you find out about how Copilot derived a particular answer? Do any of these LLMs, I mean, either of you, do they sort of
I've got an answer, I've got an answer, but I'm going to let Cyrus answer first.
I don't know if they know. I think you can probably references of what it actually looked it up, but if you want to know how it reasoned to that decision, I don't know if they even know that. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Brian?
So how they reasoned to the decision, no, but you can figure out what data was referenced as part of the response. So we're talking specifically about Copilot for 365, so I'm going to narrow my answer to just that. The way Copilot for 365 works is you create a prompt. So you prompt it, and then it goes and looks at the Microsoft graph. What it's actually doing is looking at what's called the semantic index on top of that graph. So the graph says, here's what Brian has access to. The index is, here's all of the content that has been indexed, that is part of the data that Brian has access to. That is what is sent to the LLM. And then the LLM processes it, and then there's a responsible AI check done at the end. So if my account has access to a bunch of stuff like employee 401k data or source code that I'm not supposed to have access to, it doesn't matter. Copilot just knows that I do, because the controls say, the access controls say I'm supposed to. So if you want to figure out how these responses were created, you could look at the actual data that was referenced as part of the response. That is logged. We surface it as part of our behavior log, where we say, here is the actual prompt, here's the actual response. I've already showed something. So
it's the show your work, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. So let me show you something. So if you want to see this, here's how you would actually do it. So I am looking at, click and share here. So this is, I'm looking at Varonis here on a Copilot environment. You can see we're logging all of the prompts. We're also logging the conversation. So here was the prompt, here was the response. We actually analyze that. So we'll show you if anybody's asking something weird, or if the responses contain stuff that they probably shouldn't know. But then if you combine the right logs together, what you can also do is say, here are the specific documents and their labels and the classification of their contents. Again, those are two different things that were referenced as part of the response. Now, this doesn't unravel the black magic of exactly how the response was created, but once you know the content that was referenced as part of it, you're much further along to actually answering that question. I hope that provides some color for people.
Yeah, it very much does. And again, reminding everybody, if you would like a nice warm handoff to Varonis, they'll show you exactly what that is. Please go answer in the poll right there. All right, let's go to some more questions that we have, because we have a ton. Oh, actually, this question's relevant to the one you just answered, Brian. It comes from Andrew Aiken. Is this correct? Once Copilot has had access to the data, even if we subsequently change access permissions to that data, it's already been added to the LLM and is available for subsequent queries. Is that true? Not true?
That's not true, actually, because the LLM, it's not the training set for an LLM is different from the content that is analyzed as part of a response. So when Copilot is the Copilot training is done separately, the index of content is based on the Microsoft graph. And when you lock things down, when you remove access controls or you restrict permissions, the graph gets updated, which means the index of the content available to a user prompting Copilot also gets updated. So yes, it is not in real time, but it happens relatively quickly. So, one of the things we find is massive amounts of highly sensitive information open to literally everybody in the company. And I found an HR site on one risk assessment that we did that because the data had been migrated from a legacy file system, the everyone group was still baked into one of the entitlements that was now part of the SharePoint members group, which basically meant the members of this SharePoint site included every single account that could authenticate. As soon as we removed that, and that meant, by the way, that anybody that prompted Copilot was going to reference data in that SharePoint site because everybody in the company had access to it. And so what we did is we went through a process of removing that control, but replacing it with the users who were actually using data legitimately. And that what happened then is the graph gets updated, and that means that Copilot prompts were no longer able to reference that content if the user wasn't specifically part of the HR group. I hope all of that made some sense. But the answer to your question is yes, you could update access controls, and it will then restrict Copilot references to that content.
Here's another question. I'm going to actually throw this one to you, Cyrus, because I'm interested to know if you're doing it. Do you guys automatically transcribe meeting notes? Because that seems that can be a thorny little space. Is that done? And have you been in an environment that's done?
So we use the Zoom AI assistant, and we ensure that it's explicit. It's not turned on by default, right? You have to explicitly turn it on, and then we limit how long it can actually exist for. We're mostly concerned around board meetings and earnings meetings and sensitive conversations like that. So we don't turn it on by default. The leakage part, it's kind of hard to trace the loss event to it, right? You're kind of worried about, Zoom being hacked. So I think that it's definitely a challenge that it could be leaked out, but in the same sense,
you leave it only in Zoom. You don't import it somewhere else. So it's only in Zoom, and whatever the time period you have, it evaporates after that.
Well, people will copy it into, Jira tickets or into other notes and things like that. So I feel like it's kind of the same risk that we.
So there could be manual, but you're not doing anything automatically, moving it into some database.
No. We don't automatically move it in any database. We don't automatically keep it like that. We essentially, people use the AI notes, and they're kind of instructed to hey, take those notes, but don't, if you need to keep them in some other system where you physically review them and move them somewhere else. But we don't turn it on by default at all. And it depends on your organization, but I think in publicly traded companies, there's always a danger around that. You may not want those notes too. You may be having a personal Zoom with somebody, and if you forget that thing's turned on, you don't want that conversation to be.
Oh, I'm sure everyone forgets it's turned on. It's like having a hot mic on you and you don't realize it.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of stories about this. Let me just read Dr. X's question here. There are some AI offerings that take your meeting notes and build a report, lots of them. But confidential information could leak out. What is your stance regarding that? So let me throw also to you. This has got to be kind of at the top of the list because more and more organizations are doing this, auto-transcribing meeting notes. Yes, Brian, does this hit the plate pretty often?
I might push back on it being at the top of the list, but it's actually absolutely something you need to keep. You need to keep an eye on, but this is also related to not just meeting notes, but these AI tools are going to create lots of net new data, much of which is confidential and highly sensitive, faster than ever before. So part of the problem is that this problem is going to get worse. So those meeting notes are going to be created. They're going to exist in a text file somewhere. There's 2 points to this. One, to Cyrus's point, make sure you know when and how they're being created, but we also have to assume they're going to be created in places that we don't know about or don't expect or do know about, but then that data just needs to be protected. This all comes down to being a data problem. The transcribing meetings is potentially a very, very useful tool. Okay, but where's that transcription going? Who's got access to it? Is it being monitored? Because the act of creating it isn't an attack in and of itself. The act of saving it isn't an attack in and of itself. The act of giving access to people to use it isn't an attack in and of itself. The problem is when that data isn't properly tracked, isn't properly controlled, and isn't properly monitored, who knows what's going to happen later? Are the minutes of our board meeting going to get leaked because it ended up in a text file that we didn't know about sitting in someone's OneDrive because it was part of the Teams chat, just for example.
By the way, we do have a few good bad ideas. They're pretty darn good. A few good ones. I'm going to set everybody up. We're going to be playing the Department of Yes later. And Brian, I think, holds the title of playing this game the best. So, by the way, I'm setting you up, Brian.
You're setting
either
the bar
you got to
so
knock it out of
high.
the park.
Yeah.
He is. I think it was Dwayne Graham was one of the first people that said, "I think he just convinced me to do this incredibly stupid idea." All right, I do. Let me just answer. Let's answer one more question. We're going to get to the game fairly soon. This is an interesting question, and maybe also, Cyrus, you can just talk about like your fear of gaps. But we talked a lot about the challenges with giving users the right to access to the right data at the right time in Office 365 Copilot. This comes from Chris W. Current state of the solutions, we're talking about that. But I want to just lean on this very last question. What are the gaps? Brian, what do you think the gaps are?
Well, I'm going to summarize the gaps. Employees have access to too much data. Not most of your data, or a lot of it, doesn't have a label on it, or it's mislabeled, meaning that the DLP or the perimeter controls don't work. So insiders can find data, attackers can leverage this to find digital secrets to move laterally. None of us have enough people to go lock it down, and we're going to create lots of new data very, very quickly. So the capabilities gaps are, we don't know what we don't know. Even if we were able to find the security controls that are misconfigured, we don't have enough people to go fix them, and the problem is going to keep getting worse. So the real gap is the outcomes of, is our data properly protected in a measurable way, and have we minimized the time to detection and time to response for any given threat? And that could be anything from an insider making a mistake to a nation state actor trying to, leveraging a supply chain hack to get access to our data. There's a broad spectrum there, but unless we can actually measure risk and reduce it automatically, and unless we can minimize time to detection, time to response, these problems simply will not go away. You need to map all of the access and automatically reduce it because you don't have enough people to do it on your own.
Let me ask you, Cyrus, what is the top 2 or 3 what-if scenarios that you keep hearing that are scaring the crap out of the business?
I mean, as it pertains to just Gen AI in general?
Yeah, just like what is the like, this is just on the top of the list. What if this happens? What if that happens?
I think the top fear is the over provisioning of access is one. The one that I worry the most
about,
the one I worry about the most now is the time between a 0-day being released and the exploit code being created. I think that's the one that keeps me up at night, that I worry the most about, because I remember, that sometimes these 0 days come out and then you're basically hours ahead of when they attack you. So I do worry about that. And then I'd also think that I feel like there's not enough public red teaming of Gen AI tools. I feel like that we don't know enough about, there's not enough public information about how these things go wrong. I mean,
that's a good point right there.
ChatGPT released I forgot what it's called. They had some obscure name for it, something card or something. And they released, like, they took the guardrails off it and they showed what it can do. And it's pretty dangerous. And those are coming out. So I feel like we need a lot more publicly funded, independent red teaming of these things to understand where those gaps are. Because I think there's we're all in this sort of wait until something really bad happens moment. So I think right now it's the unknown is what we're most feared about in the AI space. Really
good point there. I do want to remind people, please register for next week's event as well. And please stick around to the end so we can have our very, very last meetups only on Toucan. We're going to keep having meetups. Oh, and I'll tease you this. We're going to be using a new platform, and we have a lot of friendlies we see in the audience here, like William Taluba, Ian Pointer, Andrew Aiken, who I'm seeing here, TC. We're going to be doing a test next week, and we would love some of our friendlies to participate in that test. So if you come to the meetup, we'll tell you about that, and we'd love to know if you can join us for that as well. All right, we are 20 minutes out from the end. We have one more game to play, and keep getting your bad ideas in. Oh, TC's got another one as well. All right, let's go to my questions that I have from our audience, of which I've a few. In a corp is... Well, I guess this is part of the red teaming thing. comes from Ian Pointer again. How can we handle LLM hallucination in a corporate environment? Essentially, hallucination meaning giving us bad data, essentially the wrong answer. Is training the only solution? What do you think?
I think, when I first wrote my first Gen AI policy, the very first thing I wrote is you're responsible for what it says. And that's really something we're harping on a lot in the training, is that you don't get to say like, the AI wrote this, I'm not responsible, right? So you really have to put the onus on people to be the experts, because Gen AI is really powerful in the hands of an expert because they can look at it and they know right away when it's wrong. It's really dangerous in an overly empowered junior person because then they might just lazily listen to it. So I think really it's you've got to strongly emphasize the human in the loop, and you got to kind of address these things down a bit and tell people like, hey, it's not sentient. It doesn't make all the right answers. It's going to make mistakes. It's just a predictive model. So I think it really that comes down to awareness training. You got to get you have to get people sensitized to it.
I have to flag TC Nitzikowski's bad idea here because I think it's actually a good idea, and I think actually it could answer this very problem around hallucinations. Require all employees to flag sarcasm with HTML tags, sarcasm/sarcasm.
I was hoping you were going to give that to me because I can run with that one as a bad
No,
idea.
no, this is a good idea, though. It's email, Slack, Teams, and internal correspondence. That's
what makes it such a bad idea, is that on the face of it, it sounds like it might be a good idea. That's the thing. And TC also makes something. TC actually said something later in the chat that I thought was really, really interesting, that I was going to jump in and give a version of that. To Cyrus's point, humans have to make the determination about whether an AI is hallucinating or not. You can't trust that when Google tells you to put glue into your tomato sauce to thicken it up, that's a really good idea. He used the running with scissors example. There's a couple of other ones that have been in the news recently that some a little darker than others. Yeah, there's no because we can't tune these models ourselves unless you're building your own model. And ask Air Canada how that went when their chatbot was giving away free flights. So you need to training and responsible use of AI is absolutely critical here.
Yes, but sarcasm it's also, cannot be seen in text.
Part of this is we're using the word intelligent here, and artificially intelligent. These models are not intelligent. They're predictive models. It's a large language model. It's basically saying that when I have seen this word in this position in a sentence that contains these other words, that it's really likely that the next word in the sentence is whatever, which is why they hallucinate, because there is no actual understanding there. It's just a predictive model based on words. So yeah, the answer to that question is, if you're going to use Gen AI, you're going to have hallucinations. And if you're going to have hallucinations, your users better know how to identify them and what to do with them.
But yes, sarcasm can really mess things up. I mean, and people write sarcastic things in emails all the time, which, by the way, from my side, I've put little, the winky smiley face to indicate sarcasm, which I got to assume maybe LLMs do understand that. Who knows? I have no idea.
Or maybe you're just flirting with it.
No, that's true.
But what if your LLM says that back to you? How do you interpret that?
Wasn't that the case? Actually, the first story I heard about AI was that the New York Times guy said that the AI model was like flirting with him and telling him to dump his girlfriend or wife at the time, and said, "I'm in love with you." That's creepy.
I remember that.
We live in a brave new world.
All right, here we go. Let's go.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right. I am going to start with you on this one, Brian, because I think this is an awesome idea. This is from Sean Bowen, who's from World Connect. He's the CISO over there. Build a Copilot look-alike front end, but the back end just be the executive's mothers responding to inquiries. I don't think this is that bad of an idea.
It's not a bad idea, and frankly, this is probably the single most cost-effective way to make your employees more productive. Not only do you have someone with context, this is someone who lives with and raised the CEO or the CISO. Sorry, the title there.
Well, it's any executive.
Any executive. This is somebody who has the context, who they are, how they think, what they care about, who's going to respond not as a hallucinating LLM, but is going to respond as someone with the context and empathy to give you the answer that you actually need to be more productive. The whole point of building copilots and rolling them out is to make employees more productive, to increase revenue, to reduce friction as we need to act as knowledge workers. And this is far and away the best idea because you're replacing the risk of hallucinations with somebody with that context. And
hold on. You, first of all, I'm going to give you this. Sir, yes, sir! But I'm also going to give you that. No, sir! I'm going to give you that because you haven't played our new game that we play on the show called What is Dave's Mom Talking About? Where I interview my mother about cybersecurity terms. And in fact, here, I'll play one for everybody. Here, let's see if this was one. Actually, if you guys heard the most recent episode of the CISO Series podcast, you'll know this one. But tell me if this is my mom explaining some concept in cybersecurity. You tell me if you can understand this.
In some medium, like kids would get together and push each other.
Do you know what my mother's talking about? So you're saying the mother would have a good answer because she has context. This is my mom.
Well, the mother would have a good answer, but I need to know the prompt. I need to know the question that was asked.
Oh, it wasn't the question. I told her a term in cyber.
Okay.
And she just defined it. Now can you tell? By the way, she's wrong. Do either you know what this is? Some people who listen to the episode knows what this is.
Children can get together and push each other.
I think the chat's got it right.
It's not. Is it cyberbullying?
Yeah.
No, that would be if my mom was correct. No, get ready for this.
Uh-huh.
It's sandboxing.
That's awesome.
All right. Awesome. So, if my mother was answering it, those are the kind of answers you'd be getting.
I've worked on a number of development teams where the sandboxing exercise was very similar to a lot of children getting together and pushing each other. So, through some lens, I think your mom is actually right.
All right.
Yes, spiritually, she's there.
I'm throwing this to you, Cyrus. Cyrus, you still haven't answered. Build a Copilot look like front end, but the back end and just be the executive mothers responding to inquiries. Why do you want to do this?
Listen, you can't trust these AIs to give you the right answers to any of these questions. They hallucinate. They're gonna lead us in the wrong direction. So we want to make sure that when we enable this in our environment, that our executives lose trust in these tools. So that way, when they try and use them to, do business activities, that we just give them answers that don't work, so that we can just kill this whole thing and go back to the way things have always been. Having our mothers answer these questions behind the scenes will give people the right impetus to go figure out the answer themselves and do it the old-fashioned way and research it the way they should. We can't kill the popularity of these things. Our people are going to be asking for it, but we can set it up in a way that they stop using them.
Well, I'm going to give you that, and I'm giving you both because here's why. A, that's a good thing, but what happens if they start using the advice? You realize that all these executives are puppets and their mothers are the puppet masters.
Maybe that's always been true, David, and now we can finally realize it and have data to prove it.
All right, I'm going to give you one more. This one comes from TC Nizakowski. Here goes. Bad idea. I'm going to have you answer this one first, Cyrus. Wait till there's an incident before restricting permissions. So just let this whole Copilot run wild, and until there's an incident, don't restrict any permissions. Why do you want to do this?
It's going to take a really long time for us to assess our environment and get our access controls in place. And we're going to have a major opportunity cost by not adopting these things faster. The risks of an incident, it's very low likelihood we're going to have like a major loss event occur from just opening this up. But the potential productivity benefits and cost benefits that we can gain as an organization are tremendous. So we absolutely need to just turn this on for everybody. And then, it's easier for us to essentially figure out where one thing goes wrong than trying to assess 1,000, 10,000 things to stop them from happening.
Oh, yeah! You won on that one. All right, Brian, why do you want to do this?
You want to do this because if you try to restrict access controls without understanding how this data is being used, you're going to break all kinds of things. Your risk is going to skyrocket. So the only way to actually understand how the controls should be applied is to break them, to find out what's going to go wrong. So the only way to do this effectively is exactly that, to deploy Copilot, to see what happens, and then when something does go wrong, you know exactly what you need to fix. Otherwise, you're flying blind.
Good answer. I'm proud of both of you. Good job. All right. Oh, let me go through some of the 10% better tips that I did get right here. Andrew Aiken was saying create a comprehensive Gen AI policy on what it can and can't be used for, which I don't know how many people would actually use that. People,
I think about
how
this.
often do
We
people
all
pay
have
attention to
cybersecurity
policies?
Every, I guarantee you, every company that's been breached in the last 10 years had a pretty well documented cybersecurity policy.
Policy
So
that
policies
said,
are
"Don't
useful.
do the thing that
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
just happened."
Yeah. So it's funny when we'll talk about this, but policies are really important, but you also need policy as code. It needs to be implemented. Guardrails need to be implemented automatically, or else there's a really good chance that they won't be.
Well, Cyrus, since you came from the technical background, let's talk about what has been your success with guardrails and not success with guardrails.
Oh man, that's a tough one. So
I mean, you could pick it in any environment here, because this is actually interesting, because what you're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, you're creating technical guardrails here. Yes? I mean, that's what you're doing.
Well, by me, if you mean Varonis, yes. But in general, that's what we want, right? You want people to be productive. You want them to be able to use these collaboration platforms. You want them to be able to use AI tools like Copilot. You want them to be able to work. You want them to be able to work quickly and efficiently, but you need to have guardrails in place. If it's part of the problem is if it's the Wild West, who's the sheriff? You need to have guardrails in place, but the bigger problem is who is going to actually apply the guardrails, and who's going to make sure that they're there, and who's going to make sure that they're still valid, because the guardrail that's applicable and appropriate today might be different tomorrow or next quarter or next year.
All right.
yeah, I think it's really important.
Let's go back to my question ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Going back to the question that I had before about success and failures with technical guardrails.
I mean, so you always want to start small, right? I mean, you try and do too many guardrails and you sort of fail before you start. People don't want to adopt, they become less likely to try to adopt what you're doing and want to work around you. So I think it's always smart to get to a good hygiene place first. I mean, when I think guardrails, especially in AI, as far as like, what filters you put on the responses, what filters you put on data that you send to third parties. You want to make sure that kind of meets your minimum compliance requirements at a minimum, but you also want to make sure that when you try and go beyond that, where you actually start putting, actual gates and pipelines and gates on things that actually stop stuff from working, that you really are in a good hygiene state first. So I think guardrails, you really need to have champions on who you're guardrailing with. I don't think if you do kind of take a security only focus where you say like, you don't kind of have a appreciation for the business business value of what you're putting guardrails around and having their input on it, I think you're kind of doomed for failure there. But you want to start small.
Yeah. All right. Hang tight. I have to do some closing information here. So let me just go through that, and then we'll have closing comments from both of you. Let me remind everybody, please register for the link for next week's event. Right there, the link's at the bottom of the screen. Please click that darn thing now. Please, I beg of you, register for next week. Join us. You see how a lot of fun this thing is. You'll enjoy it. Also, if you haven't done this yet, if you would like a nice warm handoff to these fine people, our sponsors today, Varonis, go click on the poll, and we will make that happen. We will make this happen for you. You want that to happen. All right. Starting soon at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, our cybersecurity headlines we can review. And we've got, this guy's awesome. I met him in Amsterdam, Dimitri van Zandvliet. He is the CISO of Dutch Railways, which I even rode while I was in Amsterdam. And I appreciate the security he's putting to it. I also know that... well, there was another train system of which I met the CISO for that, and I did not feel so secure with that person. So I can't mention this train system because someone could do some basic math and figure it out. But there was one I didn't care for. But that is happening soon. That's always fun. We just reviewed the top 8 stories in cyber news for that week, and Dimitri will give you his take on those stories. All right, stick around for our meetup. Let's go change that link at the bottom of the screen. We want you to participate in our meetup. There it is. Join us for our post-event meetup. It's our last day on Toucan. If you've never come and joined us, if you've never gotten to meet us face-to-face, Brian, you'll be there. Cyrus, you'll be there. Yes? Yes.
For about 5 minutes, but I've got a hard stop
All right.
I got to drop.
Come
but I will
5 minutes.
see
But
everybody
again,
for 5 minutes.
if you still want time with the nice Varonis people, click the darn poll there, and we'll make that happen. All right. Would you like to sponsor a Super Cyber Friday? Guess what? We got them opening up in the lovely month of July. Just email me at info@CISOseries.com. All right. with that being said, how much time we got left? We have 5 minutes left. I'll start with you, Cyrus. Cyrus, any last thoughts on this topic? And you know what? Let me throw this out to you. I don't know the situation. Are you hiring over at PennyMac?
I am hiring. We have lots of positions posted on LinkedIn, so please take a look if you
Also, you'll be in the meetup
application
afterwards.
security.
You can come meet
Yes.
Cyrus as well.
For sure.
All right.
For kind of closing remark, I would say I know in this conversation with this audience, we talk a lot about guardrails and security, but I feel like as security leaders, we really are the people that need to usher this into the enterprise. The actual productivity benefits of Gen AI are massive. I know even in our SOC, we adopted a lot of this technology, and we saw all of our metrics just, all the mean time to whatever, even mean time to X, all dropped dramatically once we started bringing this stuff in. So I feel like we've got to be the responsible stewards of this technology and help the company bring it in. We did an assessment of kind of who was using large language models, and there was certainly a I'd say like a rank and age difference in the histogram there about, younger people kind of feeling they have to like hide that they're using it. And then, the older folks and the more senior folks, more risk averse, thinking that there's too much security risk to even try to use it. So I think it's really upon all of the, CISO community to be the steward that helps bring it in safely so you can get all the right, benefits out of it. And because I think, this is one of those things where one really bad situation like the ones Brian showed at the beginning of this meeting can really kind of kill the entire thing and you lose all the benefit. So I think that just want to, highlight the other side of there's a lot of reward to be had here.
All right, Brian, I'm going to throw this to you. I want to thank both you, Brian, and also Cyrus for joining. Brian, let me just ask you, is there anything, and we only got a few minutes, but is there anything really big that we did not touch upon today? I know you can go on forever on this topic, but what is a big issue that we have not touched upon today?
I think we've touched upon all the issues. What you really want is, I'm going to show another video here because
sure, please.
This is how you want things to look, right? So once you've gone through a process of actually putting guardrails in place, and by the way, someone said, and I apologize, I can't see the chat, that you have to have the policy before you can have the guardrails, before you can implement it. Absolutely. Right. But the policy is, I don't want to say easy, but it's much more straightforward than actually implementing the guardrails. So we do, and this is why if you want to warm hand off with us, we do Copilot readiness assessments, we do data risk assessments, cross-cloud and hybrid. We'll map your whole 365 tenant. Dr. X was joking in the chat about a sewage treatment plant going berserk. We did one of these for a major U.S. city, and we found a nation-state actor actively attacking their water system. So you joke about sewage treatment plants going berserk. Listen, we live in a digital world. It's the easiest thing to say, but it is 1,000% true. So if you want to know, Cyrus said one of the smartest things I hear most CISOs say is that the biggest priority is the unknown unknowns. Like, it's the problems you don't know that you have to solve that are going to kill you. We can help you at least answer a few of those.
Very, very good. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Let's wrap this sucker up. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, Cyrus. And thank you to our audience as well. We greatly appreciate you coming here and participating. I always say half of the show is what goes on in that chat room. So I really, really appreciate you doing that. All right. So this is what I wanted everybody to do. I want you to click the link at the bottom of the screen. Join us for the very, very last Toucan meetup. Not our last meetup, but last Toucan meetup. And please let us know if you're available for our test next week on our new platform that we're going to be testing out as well. So we want to try that. Thanks again to Brian and Veronis. Thanks again to Cyrus and PennyMac as well. And thanks to everyone, to you and to my producers, Andrew and Rich, working in the background, making all this happen. And Aaron was out today, but he did a lot of setup for this darn thing as well. Thank you, everybody. Take us out, Andrew or Rich.